You're good. Because I know where the extra ones were. Awesome. This is the first time sitting in the chair.
Okay, we have three nominees for president. Lorraine Gage, Eric Hartz, and Susan Manning.
Would you read that again, Tish?
Lorraine, Eric, and Susan Manning.
Oh, I would remove my name from the ballot. Thank you very much. Thank you, whoever did that.
Okay, so we have two nominations for the position of president. Request a written ballot then.
Do we have to request that separately, or is that?
Probably should, 'cause I think we asked for a request for nominations prior, didn't we? So we should also ask for a request for written ballots, actually secret ballots for the voting process.
For the new members, normally all of our voting has to be open, and for the election of officers, we're allowed to do secret ballots. But somebody has to request it. Nobody requested. Did somebody request it?
No, I'm still looking for a request.
I will make said request.
Okay.
So I would make a request that we would do this by written ballot.
Okay, so we will proceed with our voting by written ballot. So please vote for one for the position of board president. The nominees are Eric Hartz and Lorraine Gage.
And for the vote number, do we just put number 1?
Yeah, this is first ballot.
You want to get your steps and get in.
Audit. And one of the things that we took a lot of time that evening talking about the HR department and how that group, supports our the work in their district and the capacity to do that work. And what we did spend a lot of time on is more on the administrative side, and there were some recommendations, and it was noted that there wasn't a lot of detail behind those recommendations for the rationale, that the study really was a lot of in-depth individual interviews and interviews in focus groups, but that it might be helpful to see a little more of a summary of those, of what was found and the findings of that. So Nicole and I did have a check-in meeting with Deirdre last week to talk through that in more depth. And she agreed that she will put together a follow-up report, a supplemental report that we can share out with the board. I think part of the rationale for not having that initially, of course, is trying to respect confidentiality of those conversations, but she also recognized that's important information, right, to have that rationale. So she is going to work on that, and then we'll have a future board update with that. And again, nothing has to happen quickly. We have plenty of time, really this next school year to work through any potential changes based upon that report, and so more to come. But I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have this evening.
All right, no questions, Dan. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, next is DPI July 1st state aid estimate. Mark.
Yeah, July 1st every year we get the projected state aid from DPI, and obviously we're in the middle of a budget development and state budget approval. When I presented the budget information to the board on the 14th, I had projected 17.9 million in state aid, which is about a 5% increase over the current, or I guess we're not current anymore, 22-23 school year. So our projection, as you can see, it now is 19.5. So we have to wait till the budget is finalized and they run, everybody's year-end numbers are put through and whatever they're gonna do with the formula and the additional state money that they're putting towards that, pending any vetoes or overrides, obviously. But I just wanted to update the board. Obviously, as you recall, more aid means less tax money. So it'll be somewhere between what I projected and the 19, maybe it'll be more, we don't know. So that's where we are.
Great. Questions from the board members? Okay, thank you, Mark. All right, moving on to Teaching, Learning, and Equity Committee. Elizabeth?
Yeah, so the TLE committee met on June 28th, and the entire theme of the meeting was around going over curriculum. So for those of you who've been following along TLE, you'll know that we had a new math curriculum this year, illustrative math in K-5 and mid-school math in 6-8, and then there's some changes to discussion around the high school math curriculum, which we can talk about in a minute. And so TLE had requested that Lisa and crew come and talk about kind of how first year of implementation went for the new math curriculum, as well as we're in a curriculum adoption cycle for ELA, so which English language arts curriculum we picked that will be adopted next year and implemented next year. And then we're also in the process of sort of reviewing our current social emotional learning curriculum as well as our science curriculum. So sort of just like status update on all that. It was a lovely meeting full of lots and lots and lots of discussion around curriculum. A couple of things to note. Overall, math implementation this year went pretty well, like all new curriculums, right? It wasn't 100% perfect, but overall students were super engaged, staff seemed to like it, and next year the focus is going to be kind of continuing to implement that with fidelity and keeping pace for kind of what the lessons are in those pieces. For ELA, we have a new curriculum, so for those of you who enjoy Googling things like I do, it's Amplify's CKLA curriculum, which stands for Core Knowledge and Language Arts. And it's really about like deep content knowledge and some researchy pieces, and it should be pretty neat, I think. And Lisa shared that the student feedback on it, so they pilot these programs in various classrooms, right, so that they can get teacher feedback and student feedback on kind of what works and what doesn't work. And the students really enjoyed this one. And I shared that my own child actually was in a pilot classroom, and this was his favorite too, so he was very excited to hear that this was coming. And then social emotional learning, they'll be looking next year at, what curriculum we'll be adopting for the following year. So we got a brief update from Lisa on that. And then similar for science. So in science next year, they'll take a look at what curriculum options are out there based on kind of what our goals are, as well as what the curriculum standards are. They'll pilot it in a couple of classrooms to sort of get a feel, and then they'll choose. And so we'll continue at TLE to get regular updates on what curriculums we're doing, where folks are in the renew cycle, and how it's going overall. And then eventually our data will be able to catch up with, how kids are performing, right? So like this year, first year of implementation with the math curriculum, so you can't really compare necessarily the math curriculum or the math data from before to this year, but a couple of years down the road, we should be able to see kind of what the impact is of the curriculum on the student achievement data. It was a very wonky meeting, which is how I like to roll. Questions, wonderings? Lisa, anything that you'd want to add?
You did a nice job.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right.
So we have no meeting in July because it's July, and so our next meeting is Wednesday, August. Dan, keep me honest here.
It's the same day we're.
23rd, thank you. 3 o'clock. As always, all are welcome to hang.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Next is the Monona Grove Education Foundation. Susan Manning?
Yes, so the Monona Grove Education Foundation met on July 11th at 4 p.m. They started with reports and announcements, a report out from Superintendent Dan Olson. And here's the good news, guys, quote unquote, good news on the state budget. We now will receive $325 per student, which gives us $700,000 more revenue than we had anticipated, which gives us more flexibility. We settled our teacher salaries, and they need to hire more educational assistants. There are currently 15 openings. Other announcements, they had received several thank you notes and a thank you video for scholarships that were given this year. And we're going to have the honor of actually hearing from one of those students tonight. New business, discussion and possible approval of the 2023-24 school year program fundraising goal. And Patty Parrott presented basically an outline of the campaign they're intending to use with letters, logos, yard signs, flyers. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And they'll be trying to peak in October at that, aiming at individual sponsors more than business sponsors, families that have experienced good things in the district. And they'll be using email, letters, posters, and Infinite Campus to get the words out. Old business, so on their committee reports, they have a grant and awards committee. There was no update at this time from Jane Beebe. They did a pay it forward committee report, which is basically to provide things that students need in the school, whether it's personal or more school related. And there was a request for a grab and go at Winnequa School, and the board approved that. The communications committee did not report this month. The fundraising committee report came in the previous part that I was talking about. The snack pack committee did not report this month. Scholarship committee and investment committee did not report this month. Carrie Robbins, in case you know her, previous board member, thought it might be fun, and she brought up the suggestion of the foundation being in the homecoming parade to increase their visibility. So I think Jason and Carrie are going to talk about that. We'll see how that goes. They're going to have, the future agenda item is to continue discussion about honoring Kathy Thomas, who was a city of Monona alder for like 35 years, gave so much, and then she was on the Education Foundation for a significant period of time. The next meeting date is August 8th at 4 p.m. And the student that we're going to hear from tonight that's going to talk about scholarship from the Monona Grove Education Foundation is Krishna.
Yeah, thank you so much. A lot of you probably didn't see me last meeting. That's because I went to the National Leadership Conference. It's in Michigan, 8 days long. It's really crazy. You go into like a cabin, you meet people from all across the world. In fact, they even made this teenager give up their phone. It's crazy. And it would have been almost impossible for me to attend had it not been for the Monona Grove Education Foundation. It was really crazy because it almost never happened. One day, Ida Sobotek, who is a fantastic art teacher at our high school, just came into my AP Lang class and decided to show the promo video for this conference. I decided, sure, what the heck, why not just go in, see what it's like. And she told me to write a scholarship essay to the Education Foundation called the NGEF NLC Scholarship. I applied, and lo and behold, I actually got it. I wasn't the only one, though, from like all of our MG kid group who got it. One of my friends, Dylan Crash Newland, he also got the scholarship as well. And nearly every day after school, he goes down to this auto shop where he earns $11 an hour and works. He has plans to get a pilot's license by the end of the summer. I mean, it was funny because before the conference, like, I barely knew the guy. I didn't really know what to say. And by the end of the conference, we were making plans to head down to St. Louis and visit some of our camp buddies there. It was just crazy. We couldn't stop talking. And none of that.
Can't imagine that, Christian.
I know. Yeah, he wanted to fly us down to St. Louis. My mom,
Yeah.
gonna have to work that past
You know what?
her.
That's a good mom, Krishna.
Yeah. But all this is to say that it would have been impossible for us to do that. For just about, 7, 8 MG kids to just go to this conference, nearly all of us for the first time ever, and completely change the face of it without the efforts of the Monona Grove Education Foundation. We did actually record a video, which I assume would be shown in one of your meetings.
Yeah.
But I just want to say, because of that experience and that opportunity I have, not only is there just so much I've learned in my life that has helped me become a better person, but so much I see I could reinvest into my community. And because of that, I'd be really interested to learn and hear how I can involve myself, how I and so many other students, if they were interested, could help out. Because just this one opportunity that I got for this, and the opportunity that was afforded to all of my classmates, is one that was just probably the best of my life. So I really want to help other kids in my school get chances like that as well. So thank you so much for allowing us to do that.
That was amazing. Sounds like a really fun conference.
I'm really, what did you do there? I mean, obviously, other than stay in a cabin and talk with folks.
Yeah, no, you wake up at 7 a.m. and we didn't go to bed till 11.
Oh my gosh.
It was just crazy. Yeah, you had all sorts of workshops, almost like classrooms for leadership skills, but a lot of active things too, like going on camp, doing quests, if you will.
Cool.
I even met someone from Germany. So I don't know what the 21st century equivalent of a pen pal is, but
Yeah.
I guess we're trying it out, seeing
Cool.
where it goes.
That
Yeah,
sounds
I had
really
a lot of
fun.
I'd love to see the video too.
I know, me too. Yeah.
The other thing that, I mean, again, I think it might be helpful at some time to have Jason, who really presents us very well, come and just, kind of like they do with MG21 and a yearly report, and just say, we have this many scholarships, we have given this many out, we have helped this many students. The presentation they did, that Torrin Young did about the Black Union college trip was really well done. And we, hadn't had a good, strong feeling about how that went.
Sure.
You would, because you had a person on that trip.
Yeah.
But often the board doesn't get this kind of feedback, which is wonderful.
So yeah, that's why I just want to say, your work really is appreciated. It has a huge impact on the community.
Well, that makes it feel better when I write notes on 472 letters, and it takes 40 hours. I mean, if you get a letter from someone said, this is what we do with the funds, it's so important, versus seeing a video or something like that, it just inspires you. So, well, again, Peter's not here. Again, going to the dinners they did where they honored the teachers, and it's been a wonderful thing for the school district to have that foundation. And it's focused on our students and our district and our teachers. You do a
Thank you.
wonderful job.
All right, thank you. Great report too, Krishna.
Thank you.
All right, next is the legislative update. Eric?
Well, there's a lot, so I'm just going to briefly go through some of the things. I met with Melissa Agard, and we talked for a while on the bill that was signed on the 5th. There's still a lot of stuff in there people are sorting through, including DPI. Some of the things in the bill didn't really specify how things are going to be done necessarily, but here's the breakdown of everything. There was a general school aid increase of 3%, it's $5.36 billion. There was, in addition to this, there was a literacy bill signed, Bill 329. This bill, Dr. Jill Utterly put out a statement that she wasn't really happy with how this bill was signed. Nonetheless, it does provide $50 million for a new literacy office, but it doesn't really specify how the money has to be spent yet. So they did not take the recommendations that DPI gave them. There is also a reimbursement rate for charter schools of $115 million. As Susan mentioned, $325 per pupil increase, so that was good. There's a minimum investment for low-income districts, however, though, so that's probably going to affect the state. I don't think it will affect our district, but...
Can you say that part again, Eric? Sorry.
What?
Can you say what you just said again? I missed it.
A minimum investment for low-income districts. probably won't affect us.
Got it.
But
Thank you.
there is a special ed rate increase of 3%, so 33%. It was 30%. The governor is asking for 45 and 60. Obviously, we didn't get that. There's $7.5 million increase for high-cost special ed students. That probably will affect us some. And there's $30 million for mental health. Again, not specified how exactly that's going to be spent, so we don't really know that yet. I think that's pretty much everything, except for the real clever, interesting thing that you might have heard about on the news, is the governor used his line item veto to change the dates, and some genius found that if you take away the hyphen, that we now have 400 years, and I double checked to see if this is true, and it stands, and it does right now.
So good.
But there's going to be they already have the bill written that's going to be coming through to get rid of this. So I imagine this isn't going to last long, but right now, 400 years, there is no levy restriction now for school districts. So, for instance, if we wanted to have a referendum, well, we wouldn't have to have a referendum now if we wanted to raise the levy. We could just
For the next 400 years.
do it.
Very clever, Governor Evers.
Again, I do not think that's going to last too long. We'll see what happens.
I would agree.
But I do think we're in a short window for districts that might need to use it. We just went to referendum, so we probably won't. But maybe we should consider and have a discussion.
Well, I think it put in place the 325 permanently, is what it did.
Correct. So if you wanted more than 325, though.
Still gotta go to referendum.
Yeah, but you can do up to 325
Right,
if you
right.
need to raise the levy
Right,
amount,
right,
yeah.
right.
I think, is that how, yeah.
That's my interpretation.
Yeah, so basically every year, if
Yeah.
you needed to raise it to get to 325,
Right.
you could just do
It's automatic in
It's
the
automatic.
calculation.
Yeah, for a short term,
Correct.
most likely.
Yes.
That's it. That's all. There's a lot of information, so it sounds like a lot of it's being sorted through right now. So.
All right, thank you,
So at
Eric.
least-
All right, moving on to possible action items. First is annual declaration and parent notice of district student academic standards. Yes.
I would move approval of the annual declaration and parent notice of district student academic standards that will be in effect for the 2023-24 school year, pursuant to section 120.12, paren 13, and section 118.30, paren 1G, paren A of the state statutes as presented.
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion?
Is there any changes in any of these content areas?
No, the math was updated in 2020, ELA in 2021.
Okay.
That was probably the most recent one affected in these 4 quarters, so. I mean, they're working on some science updates,
Okay.
social studies, but what you have linked in here are the most current.
Okay.
Lisa, can you just share a little bit about this for our newer board members so they understand what?
Oh, sure. So the Department of Public Instruction has their content areas on a cycle as well for review of the standards. And so they pull together a committee, they survey educators throughout the state, they ask for feedback, first about should the standards be revised, is there a need for that? And then if they get feedback that says yes, they use the committee to lean into the work. So experts who've been teaching in that field, occasionally administrators as well, get together through the state with the help of their consultants and update standards. So there is a cycle, and it is probably about an 8-year or so cycle that every content area then becomes sort of refreshed. So sometimes it's 10 years, like ELA, English Language Arts, 2010 old version, 2020 or so new version. Sometimes it's not super different. Sometimes it's just some slight updates, but in other cases there's significant change. So it's something we pay attention to because that's what we align our work to.
Okay, Elizabeth?
Oh, go ahead.
Good, no, go.
Question for you, Lisa. So I understand that this is like a statutory obligation,
Yes.
right? That we posted
Yeah.
and have it linked. And I don't know, something that I wonder about is the extent to which, outside of the fact that we're legally obligated to do it, like, is there an opportunity either through this or through some other mechanisms to actually like, I don't know, present it in a way and share it in a way where like, for the benefit of families, right? So they could, so it has more, like it's more family friendly, more aligned with not just like what the standards are for DPI, but then like what our curriculum pieces are. And I don't know, I just feel like there's an opportunity here to increase family engagement around this, other than I think what we're doing, which is like post it to the website and the box is kind of checked.
Well, I'm gonna let Lisa answer and then.
So Elizabeth, I always appreciate that you like the granular details of things, and I mean, I think that in general, the standards are something that really practitioners use most often.
Yeah.
We look at grade level standards, we understand the progression, that's something that we talk about in co-planning every time.
Yeah.
So it really influences our work. In fact, when we're going through curriculum adoption cycles, the foundational resources that we consider need to have tight alignment to standards.
Right.
So that's like one of the first benchmarks that has to clear for us to even consider it.
Yeah.
I think it could be interesting for families to see a document, but quite honestly, I would probably look at some of the beginning pages of it, which sort of describes more about the philosophy, and sometimes they have things like anchor standards or umbrella standards that really paint a bigger picture. I think that can be important and easily digestible
Yeah.
for families, rather than getting into, what
3.1825.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I think that that's what I'm sort of thinking about and wondering about. Not necessarily like, let's dive deep into the standards, right? Because I recognize that there's like a spectrum of individuals who care about these things, of which I'm on one end, and there's a whole plethora of folks on a different end, right? I'm self-aware enough, Lisa, to get that. But there are times in which our families do interact with the standards, right? Report cards, for example, right? When you do sort of standards-based gradings, and the extent to which that we can think about, okay, so we met the obligation, which is great, but then how do we take some of that and enhance it and make it digestible in a way where families are more engaged in some of those pieces, not necessarily granular, but I think more so than they currently are, or more so than we offer.
I think the report cards are a great example, because what lives on those report cards are the essential standards. So just for example, English Language Arts, 76 standards per grade level. No one really needs to memorize or know 76 standards, but you may have 8 that live on a grade level report card. That again, as our grade level teams get together, they've said, these are essential standards that really create that bedrock of the teaching and learning in this grade level. This is what is most essential in this progression for this grade.
Right.
And then that is reported on the elementary report card for the grade level.
But you don't get that until it's report card time. So what would it mean to like be more?
They see that. I mean, I guess you see that when you get a report card, or teachers are sharing information about what they're working on in class.
Yeah.
I mean, we're certainly open to other avenues or platforms. I mean, if the PTOs would love some standards presentations, nothing better than that conversation.
All right, I will not belabor this point anymore for the sake of everyone else in the room. Welcome to Conversations Between Lisa and I, where I'm always trying to get us to increase our family engagement around standards. So thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Susan?
And again, Elizabeth is absolutely right, and so is Lisa, that basically 120.12.13 requires us by law to notify the parents, guardians of students enrolled in the school district of the student academic standards that are in effect for them. That's it. And that's basically what we're doing, and we have tonight. But I have now, as chair of policy, made a note that I think it's important for us to review the policy that's related to this statutory requirement, to see, to make sure that what we're doing beyond meeting the statutory requirement, which is what we just did, that we're meeting our own need in this district for transparency and to have that information out. So for instance, when Lisa comes and presents to the board about these kinds of things, it's you know, a special board meeting and a lot of people don't know about it and the PTOs aren't always aware. But through policy, we can actually also require that additional information be presented at certain times if we want to do that. You guys can then vote it down if you want. But I think that's a perfect place for us to continue this discussion, because I think there is some thought that is coming from this board about, we're doing what's required. Okay, you stop at the stop sign, but did you look to see if everybody else stopped before you take off? It's just, where are you? What's your process? How do you put the package together? And so it'd be helpful to see in the policy how we put the package together.
I like that idea. What do you think?
So she just gave me another 2-hour job. 4 hour.
All right.
Do you mind if I add something to that?
Krishna.
Yeah, kind of just feeding off of that point. If it's hard for parents to understand what goes into academic standards for schools, I think it's definitely going to be, well, near to impossible for students to really understand that. I mean, even serving on this board, this is really the first time I've had a chance to look at it. And so with that, I wonder if there are any avenues for us to, in the future, expand this to a more student-based perspective as well, hear their input.
I love that.
Especially considering the presence of Common Core. Obviously, it's been discussed by the experts, so I'm not questioning it, but I'd be interested to see how Common Core still affects our school from the student view as well. And so that's just a point I saw you two kind of alluding to, and one I definitely support, that we need to encourage further transparency in our district.
Yeah, I love that. And I think for me, it's more than transparency, although I agree that that's important, so I'm not mitigating that point. So it's like a yes and, right? And there's this opportunity that we always have, and I appreciate, Krishna, you bringing up like the student perspective too, because I think, you know, the more that folks know what our expectations are, the more likely you are to be able to hit those expectations, right? Like that's just like how it works. If you know where the mark is, then you can go to the mark. And I struggle sometimes with, I feel like we make some assumptions around what folks may or may not be interested in, and I wonder about what if we tested some of those assumptions to see whether or not they were accurate or not. And I think actually students, I can't speak for high school, Krishna, so that would be better for you, but at least at the elementary level, like, I think the kids are in the standards and understand the standards more than we give them credit for. Like if you walk into like, it was like bring your kid to PE a bunch of times this year, which was awesome. And like the standard for what they were working on was like right there. And everybody knew what they were working on. And they may not be able to label it as like, this is standard, you know, MVPA. Right. But I think that they know what they're working on and what they're working towards. And so I think that is really important to tag for them. And then how do we elevate that so families know what they're working on and working towards in as close to real time or as proactively as possible, so that it all becomes sort of this mutually reinforcing moment. And that's all. Listen, that's always where I try to come from. And yeah, if policy is the best place to think about it, that's fine. If peer is the best place, TLE, I'll think about it no matter what space I'm sitting in. So
I think Lisa wanted to respond to that,
yeah.
and then Bill, and then Michelle.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that I think that the conversation here, I mean, part of it is the actual specific language of a standard.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think necessarily needs to live beyond practitioners.
yes,
Students definitely know their learning targets.
Yeah.
You can call it a kudos at the high school, know, understand, do. You could call it an I can statement at elementary. But the clarity of what you're doing and why you're doing it, lives in a rubric. It lives in criteria for judgment. It lives in success criteria. So students do know the standards in that way. but maybe they're not reciting that this was the reading literature 9.2
Right.
subpoint A. And no one needs to know that other than, teachers who are like, how does this standard go from first grade through, let's say, 10th grade or something like that. So I just wanted to make that point. But we actually do a lot of work in this district around learning targets, success criteria, and having that type of clarity for learning so that students can say, I know I have to get there, this is where I am now, here's my next step in it. And so when you say, how do families know? Again, families and students are bringing home their work, they're bringing home rubrics maybe, they're bringing home assessments. But like you said, teachers sometimes have the standard written on a board, or it's on the slideshow they're using, or it's in Canvas, or wherever that is. But I think that on a syllabus, there is certainly that communication of the intended learning goals. That is predominant in our classroom.
And that is definitely evident if you walk through the classrooms. I mean, it's there, you can see it. And you can tell by how the kids talk, too, to be honest with you, like the kind of language that they utilize. So, thanks, Lisa.
Thank you. Philip?
So I was going to ask a clarifying question, but I think you nearly perfectly answered it. You ripped it right out of my head. But I'll paraphrase back to make sure I have it right, which is, it sounds like the standards set forth by the state that we just adopted, the target audience is predominantly the teachers and the educators who then map those standards to their curriculum, their syllabi, rubric, like you said, et cetera. And so I guess I was going to, that being true, I was going to float out too, that if we over-publish or overexpose these standards that are really written for the educators, do we risk creating confusion or conflict where the teacher says, here's how I've interpreted standard ABC in my classroom, and it's perfectly good, right? It does, in fact, take the student from where they are to then meeting that standard, but it doesn't read exactly like the state standard is written. It's the teacher's version of how did that. And then we have a posting that says, here's the standard, and the parent goes and says, well, teacher sent home this, that doesn't match what, do we open ourselves up to potential confusion? If really these are, the idea of the state standards is to tell people this is what's driving our teachers, but this is not what our teachers may actually do in practice, quite literally. But anyway, you already clarified for me, so I appreciate it.
I'll elaborate just briefly to say, sometimes groups of grade level teachers will even have conversations about what the standards actually mean.
Right.
So it does take that sometimes deep reflection on really attending to the language of the standard in a very careful way. If the standard says, to explain or to analyze or synthesize, and you're not having students explain or analyze or synthesize, but you're addressing the same topic, you're not attending to the language of the standard, thus you're not meeting that grade level expectation. So teachers are that careful with their planning of it to make sure that students are working at grade level.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
All right, Rochelle?
I just wanted to say, I think a lot of, with the newsletters that teachers write, and they're communicating what they're working on and achieving, and I just want to be careful about asking more of our teachers than what they already are doing. So we're, if we are going to ask new things, let's see how we can make it working smarter, not harder, and pushing on more work. Because also the curriculum is set up to also make sure it meets those standards. So there are layers to getting to that point. But I love more community. I mean, I think parents like to, who doesn't like to get a little daily sheet about what your kid did and, having that communication, but that's a lot of work to do that every day.
That'd be a lot of work.
So that's my 2 cents on it.
I'm sure our staff would appreciate that too.
Exactly.
All right, so we have a vote out. So I guess, are there any other questions?
Yeah, obviously I recognize I'm not a voting member, but I would like to just add on one comment before let's move to a vote. For me, education has always been synonymous with opportunity. My mom was actually encouraged by her father and my grandfather to move to the United States to pursue a second master's. 27 years later, here I am. Malala Yousafzai, Michelle Obama, all household names. And the reason why I bring this up is because for a lot of students, and I felt this a lot my last school year, junior year, is that there is an increasing pondering about why. Especially with a lot of assignments or grades that get posted, we don't really understand why are these standards or why these are objectives and goals. And with that, I remember we had a quick little like Google form at the end of the year where we were asked, do these grades represent how much I've learned at this school? And me and my friend Ethan Warnke, we both clicked no. And I know Ethan Warnke and I don't really represent 1,000 kids, but at the same time, there's still that sentiment of, does the school really know how we can learn best? Or put another way, can this district really finger a pulse? And so that's why when it comes to standards, even though I of course have an immense amount of respect and trust for everything the board members and staff members and really statewide officials do to preserve that opportunity for us, I also think it's important that we ensure that expression and constant review of these standards is also enacted, so that way we may best continue to pursue the opportunities that future generations will so desperately need. So that's why I really appreciate the opportunity to speak these opinions here tonight, and I am incredibly grateful for the goals that have been set in front of us. Thanks.
Thank you, Krishna. All right, can go to vote. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, motion is carried. All right, next is the use of an expulsion hearing officer for 2023-2024. Can I have a motion, please? Yes.
I would move approval of the use of an expulsion hearing officer for 2023-2024 as presented.
Someone second? Any further discussion? Okay, did you, new board members, do you have any questions or?
Yeah, I did want to ask, is this just a continuation of a policy or a practice that we've been doing?
Yes, and the reason, so there was a point in time where we, for some reason, it felt like we had, and this was over 10 years ago, we had expulsions and they were very intricate and they were involving more than just the action, the mental health, all different kinds of things. And the proceeding itself has a significant number of legal processes that you need to use. And board members aren't necessarily trained in that arena. So we still make the final decision on it. Effectively, the hearing officer does the legal review, has everybody in front of them, all of the witnesses, make sure that they are questioned within the legal guidelines that are required for that kind of questioning, rather than have us ask a question that says, well, you're not allowed to ask that question. You know, and again, part of it is, I'm not even trained in that kind of law.
Mm-hmm.
And so to try and prepare for that is very difficult, and what we're, as a school board member, I'm trying to concentrate on is the facts of the case,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what they bring forward.
Sure. No, that makes sense.
That's, again, they do all the legal pieces, they interview all the witnesses, they don't actually do the interview, but they facilitate the process so that it's done within the legal guidelines. Otherwise, you have to have somebody, another attorney there telling you, you can't ask that question, or you can ask this question, but not, you know, it just makes the whole process difficult. And the material comes to us, and you can read it and ask any questions you want. We aren't done. it just lays it out for you.
Right. No, it's clearly a process we want to get right, so I appreciate the
Yeah.
perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. All right, any other questions? Go to vote. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, motion is carried. All right, there are no discussion items today, and then future meeting dates. Next board meeting is August 9th.
Oh, wait, should we, while we're here, talk about, or did you all respond to Dan already? About superintendent eval?
I'm not sure, Tish
Yeah,
or Dan?
if I could jump in, yeah, I would like the board to develop a confirm a date this, tonight.
Yeah,
Can I ask why we can't do that as a closed session prior to the August 9th meeting, since there's not currently a closed session?
In general, it'll take more than an hour.
Oh.
That would be,
In general,
Right.
could it be done?
could we start earlier?
I will be out of town on the 23rd.
You will, okay.
Is that the date you were asking about, the 23rd, Dan?
Yeah.
yes.
Could we start earlier on the 9th?
So the 9th, that's fine. I will most likely not be here on the 9th, so I'll be on vacation, so. But please proceed without me.
Okay.
What do you mean, Eric? You love the
Well,
superintendent.
August 9th is our regular meeting.
Right. That's why I was
The
asking.
only
if we
one we're
could-
really discussing here is whether or not you're available for the 23rd. If you're not gonna be here for the 9th, you just let Lorene and Dan know.
No, so Philip isn't available for the 23rd, so Philip had suggested the 9th before the
Starting
board
earlier,
meeting.
okay.
And I had wondered if we could start closed session earlier to give us enough time to go through superintendent eval. It'll be a longer day, but then we can get it done. So that's why we're talking about the 9th.
Okay,
But Eric is more than happy for us to proceed without him.
I just don't want us to be in a, and I agree that we really need everybody here.
Summers are tricky.
The meeting that we did at 12 noon to basically interview and approve a new assistant principal was, and we had graduation, had to be in the room at 12:30, and we weren't. We came very close to having that process hold up graduation of how many people in that room. So I'm just saying, we need to be conscious about picking a date when we can all be there and leaving ourselves enough time to do the work we need to do.
Okay.
So could we meet earlier on the 9th? I know you can't be there, Eric, but
How are other board members?
We'd have to start at 5, right?
Yeah, probably.
I can make that.
I could do that.
I can
Dan,
do that.
do you have availability? If it's earlier? Is he frozen?
Yeah, that would be fine.
If we did 5, and then maybe we can
So in the
get some dinner,
past,
grab some food.
have
Yeah.
superintendent evaluation meetings been by themselves on a day to avoid them
Yeah,
overriding?
Because
the
they're
board
kind of
meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, got
But
it.
our summer agendas are usually,
So even when we had 2 meetings, we'd have a 3rd meeting then
Correct.
for the,
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, got it. That's what I was trying to clarify.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
but I think we could get it done if we started at 5 and then rolled into the board meeting.
That works for me.
Because we just have the 2 topics, right? The superintendent eval and,
Yeah, that would be fine, because the other thing you can always do too is agendize set the agenda so that if you don't finish by 7
Okay.
o'clock, you can always reconvene back into closed session at the
After-
end.
At the
okay,
end.
that'd be great, Dan.
Right.
That'd be great, yeah.
Now, as a point of clarification, is there any particular reason it's a session closed to the public?
Yeah, because it's Dan's evaluation, so it's
Personnel
personnel.
issue.
Oh, okay.
So any like personnel related issue is closed to protect the confidentiality and privacy of the person you're talking about.
Great
Thanks.
question. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
it's a great question.
Thank you.
All right, and then TLE meeting, that still be the 23rd at 3.
Yes, it's the 23rd at 3, and Dan, we're not meeting this month, so I assume we're not meeting tomorrow, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I have it as a recurring on my calendar, so I just wanted to make sure, because I just do whatever my calendar tells me to do. Thank you.
All right, can I have a motion for adjournment, please?
Move the adjournment.
Second?
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, ayes have it, motion is carried.
Thank you, guys.
Maureen.
So we're gonna say 5 on the 9th,
Efficient meeting.
right?
almost had whiplash.
Oh, yeah, I gotta put that in my calendar now, because otherwise I forget. It's 5 o'clock on the 9th.
Oh, here come the signatures.